Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donohoe here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. The livestock ship, the Atlantic M, was back in Ireland this Wednesday to export another load of cattle to Turkey. Irish Farmers Journal beef specialist Ciarán Lenihan was at Greenore port in County Louth, where he met with the IFA livestock chairman Angus Woods.
The Atlantic M livestock carrier is behind us and loading is continuing throughout the day. I'm here with Angus Woods, livestock chairman in the IFA. Angus, how is it going? I understand you were on the boat itself.
Yeah, it's going absolutely brilliantly now. You couldn't ask for better. It's a brilliant day. The weather's absolutely perfect. We're standing here. There's a lovely smell of fresh hay, and the cattle are going onto the boat. We were up on the boat there a little bit earlier on there, and it's a pleasure to see the cattle lying down on the boat there in absolute comfort and settled down in perfectly within a very short period of getting onto the boat there.
Angus, over 3,000 cattle on this load. What type?
There's a lovely batch of mainly continental animals gone on there now. There really are a fine batch of animals, and there's a whole raft of veterinary inspections happening here as the cattle are actually going onto the boat there, and they're absolute in the prime of their health there going on. It's lovely to see it.
What does this mean for the Irish beef industry, Angus?
Today is a great day for the Irish beef industry. I mean, anyone producing weanlings for sale there would be absolutely delighted to see what's happening here today. It really is great to see it. That extra little bit of competition in the marketplace is brilliant, and you can see it's very, very evident here today that the live exporter in charge here today really knows what he's at here. It's top class, first quality.
He's happy.
He should be happy. He's doing a great job himself anyway, and as I say, everything's running smoothly. It really is top class here, so it is.
He tells me there's another boat 9 days away.
Yeah, and again, that's an extreme positive. You know, it's great to see regular movements happening, and certainly from, as I say, from guys selling weanings at the moment. You know, it's always good to have that extra little bit of competition around the ring farm.
Thank you, Angus.
No problem.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Last week, my colleague Amy Fitzgibbon was at the Organic Award ceremony organised by Bord Bia. There she met the agency's chief executive, Aidan Cotter, and she started by asking him about the progress to find a successor after he retires at the end of the year.
Well, that is a matter for the board. They have been driving the recruitment process for a number of months now, and they will, I've no doubt, be ready to make an announcement in due course and well in advance of I stepping down.
Okay, the budget was announced this week. What kind of lobbying did Bord Bia have to do in advance to secure those extra funding in Budget 2017?
Well, we're not a lobbying agency at all. We have a very good relationship with our parent department, the Department of Agriculture, and I think there is a very clear recognition by the Minister and by his department in terms of the urgency, the immediacy that has been presented by Brexit, and the need to support the industry, to support companies, particularly right at the present time in dealing with the very sharp depreciation that is taking place in sterling.
And can you give a sense of, or an indication of how this money will be spent by Bord Bia in terms of insulating Irish food from the Brexit effect?
There has been an allocation of an extra 2 million announced during the budget, and we will be spending that both in helping our companies defend their position in the UK market, and also in helping companies to intensify the diversification process that is really already underway. We have opened the Singapore office very recently during our trade mission to China and to Southeast Asia. We have opened an office in Warsaw to cover Eastern Europe as well. And we have, where we are now doing this interview here in the Thinking House, we have opened this Insight Centre to help companies to significantly intensify their process of developing consumer insights, differentiating their positions in markets, and to developing their brand presence. So there's quite a lot going on that we can dial up very significantly now in the period ahead to help companies in the context of Brexit. We'll also be announcing, we hope in the next few days, a new grants programme for a particular cohort of companies that we feel are most vulnerable at the present time to the depreciation in sterling, which when you take it at its lowest point last this time last year is moved about nearly 30%. So it's a very, very sharp and a very sudden change, and companies need to be supported in that way. And we hope that in the next couple of days we may have something to announce in terms of how we want to address that.
And how will, I suppose, the companies be measured in terms of their vulnerability?
It would be in terms of their exposure to the UK market, in particular their level of exports as a percentage of their total turnover. But we're looking at a number of different metrics.
Okay. And can you provide an update on the state of play of the new the beef and lamb QA scheme?
Yes, the beef and lamb QA scheme has been revised significantly through the Technical Advisory Committee, and that has been now submitted to INAB, the Irish National Accreditation Board, for accreditation. That is in process, and we are hopeful, we expect indeed that the new scheme will be up and running from the 1st of January 2017.
Okay, and what will be the main differences in this scheme to the last one?
I think the most important difference for farmers will be the fact that there is a closeout period, so that when the audit takes place, you have the same process as currently exists in the Sustainable Dairy Assurance Scheme. You do not fail the audit. There may be issues that you have to close out in a given period after the audit has taken place. So I think that should be good news for farmers, and I think farmers are doing a very good job. Bear in mind that 95% have been passing their audits in flying colours and getting high scores. But I think the new system will provide farmers with more breathing space in terms of closing off any issues that they need to close off, and I hope that it will be certainly that they will feel that there's less pressure on them in terms of the audit. But we obviously would like to see all audits being closed off during the audit if possible, because that's in the interest of the farmers themselves. Indeed.
So this will be like a notice period, so to speak, for the farmer.
That's right. In the dairy scheme, it's an extra month after the audit has taken place, just to attend to what are usually relatively minor things that need to be closed off in order for us to retain our accreditation for the scheme.
Okay. And finally, have you any fears, I suppose, that the co-ops won't get all their dairy supplier farmers to be quality assured? In the new dairy one, all farmers have to be quality assured, isn't that right?
That's correct, and that is the goal, and I have no doubt that we will eventually achieve it. We are 70% of the way at the present time, so really almost 3 out of every 4 dairy farmers are members of this scheme. So we are in many ways, I think, in a very good place in terms of the level of penetration of the scheme and level of membership that we have achieved already. Next Friday, the 21st of October, we have the first organic Origin Green Producer Awards, and that there are 16 dairy farmers that are shortlisted from all around the country in that. And I think the experience of those farms and what they are doing, and which has been measured in their audit, is a real example as to what the Sustainable Dairy Assurance Scheme is about and what it is achieving in terms of demonstrating the excellence that is evident on these farms, and that is really evident right around the country as we go and audit those farms. And it's also, I think, is a very positive experience, as these farmers will relate in terms of their management of the farms going forward, and that this is designed to be a help to develop better farm practices to become more sustainable economically as well as environmentally.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
One of the winners at the Organic Awards was Flavins in the export category. Amy asked John Flavin, the 6th generation miller in the family, about the company's international reach.
In years gone by, we would just have had the one product. We would have just a regular Progress porridge oats, and but then we started doing organics there a number of years ago, and that one has grown and grown and grown, and that's one of our main things that we're doing now in the UK.
Okay.
So we have the largest brand of organic oats in the UK.
Amazing. I mean, compared to even to the English brands or the UK brands.
We're beating the UK brands.
Okay. And are you in some of the big retailer stores then in the UK, like the big 4?
We'd be in Waitrose would be our biggest market. Tesco. We'd be in Sainsbury and Asda, and a couple of smaller retailers as well. So we've done, and that's really what today is about, and today's award, because we've got the Organic Exporters Award.
Okay. And do you export elsewhere apart from the UK?
We were just talking to Minister Doyle, who was presenting the prizes today, and he was saying how he was delighted to see our products in Hyundai supermarkets in Seoul in South Korea.
Wow. So you are exporting then further than the UK?
Yeah. And we're going to the US, and we're looking towards Canada as well as another one. But in total we're going to, I think, about 17 countries at the moment.
And what do you think makes the Flahavens, what's the secret to this Flahavens success abroad?
I think quality of product, I think, is recognised, and we have a very good milling process, and it gives I think we have the best product.
Yeah. And do you find the government supports the organic sector?
I find that quite good. There's an interest in the organic sector, and there's good supports for it, and hopefully these are going to continue.
And we know that the tillage farmers have been facing issues lately in relation to bad weather and crops that haven't, come out of the ground properly. Is that an issue that's affected yourselves?
I'd say not so much from our point of view or from our area of the country. I know that, like, we would be, say, we do both conventional and organic.
Yeah.
Our organic, we get it from any part of the country, but our conventional, we get it within about a 60 mile radius or 100 kilometre radius of Kilmacthomas.
Okay.
So I don't think we didn't get the really bad weather that appeared to affect that band all the way up the west coast. I don't think our farmers actually got it as bad as some of the other farmers in the country did.
Okay, and John, what's the future for Flahavens? What's your kind of vision for the next few years?
Well, I suppose we have to get one of the major issues we're having at the moment now is to how we get over the whole Brexit and the currency. So that's our sort of front major challenge at the moment.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
With sterling exchange rate deteriorating, Amy has extensive coverage about the problems faced by the mushroom industry in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. She discussed the issue with Junior Agriculture Minister Andrew Doyle.
We are doing everything we can from a number of different angles, not least of which is, and this applies to other sectors as well, which was announced in the budget, but it's not necessarily a budget measure, the 150 million package that's been agreed with both Europe and the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland for low interest, flexible finance up to 150,000 to deal with liquidity problems, cash flow problems and poor prices.
Okay.
With mushrooms in particular, capacity is critical, that we can still supply the customer base, and every effort has been made. And just as a matter of information on that, my colleague Michael Creed and the CEO of Bord Bia, Aidan Cotter, are travelling, I think, next month. I think it is definitely going to be next month now, to meet the CEOs. Meetings are being arranged as we speak of all the major retail outlets in the UK to sort of say that we are open for business, but there are particular sectors, fresh food being one of them, where, if there isn't some sort of recognition of that, there's a danger of our supply line winding down, unfortunately. And some that if you stop, like mushrooms, if you stop production, that's it, you're out. You're out, yeah.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Teagasc held 2 pig conferences in Tipperary and Cavan this week. My colleague Odile Evans met some of the speakers to get the latest on pig meat markets and management advice.
I'm here with the pig conference with Peter Duggan from Bord Bia. Peter, you were talking about the access to the Chinese market, but what's changed in the last few months?
I suppose, look, over the last few months, prices would have peaked up around summertime. They started off the year flat enough, but they would have rose because of the tightness in supply, and also import demand started to build, particularly in the summer months. So prices would have peaked at around €2.90 a kilo. They've dipped slightly, but at the same time, export demand will be strong because they do purchase heavily in advance of the Chinese New Year. So hopefully the trade will stay solid up until the end of the year anyway.
And you were just saying how the Bord Bia quality assurance, that's a prerequisite for getting into the market. Why is that?
You have to be quality assured or else they won't purchase your product. Most of our processing industry are quality assured. I would say maybe 85% of the industry, primary processing industry, are quality assured. So the company, any outlet that isn't quality assured, they might be losing out €6 to €7 ahead because they're not quality assured.
I'm here with Michael McKeown from Teagasc. Michael, you were looking at optimising your sales strategy for finisher pigs. Maybe you could give me a quick outline of that.
Yep. So over the last 10 years, the pig sector has been extremely successful in increasing the sale rate of the weight of the pigs on units and also increasing the output of pigs on units. The downside of this is that there's a lot more pigs coming through the system, and unfortunately, due to the poor economic returns over the last number of years, there hasn't been the amount of housing that's needed pro rata. So what's actually happening is that finisher pens and pig units are being stocked heavier than they were before. While they're still within the legal limits, they're suboptimal for maximum performance on units. So what I was speaking about was how to maximise what you have at the moment. And really what you're looking at there is you're losing money through three ways at the moment. By being heavily overstocked at the end of the finisher period, you're losing from performance, you're losing it from grading in the slaughter plants, and also you're losing it from your output per square metre of housing. So it's looking at that and seeing what you can do to really maximise what you have there at the moment. And really what it comes down to is you need to be not selecting any pigs going into your finisher section, but looking and taking the tops off your pigs 3 weeks before slaughter, allowing extra space available then for the remaining 3 weeks of that allows a huge boost in performance, because really it's in the last 3 weeks that pigs get stuck for the extra space. So by taking the heaviest pigs out of it, about 25% of the heaviest pigs in the pen out of it 3 weeks before sale, you're allowing much greater space for the remaining pigs in the pen, and you're getting a huge boost in performance. The other advantage is that from a grading point of view at the factory, you're keeping your profile of your grading a lot tighter, so you're getting less of the underweights and a lot less of the overweight pigs where you're getting penalised on. So you're winning from performance, you're winning from grading point of view, and also because you get an increase in the output of those pigs that are left behind, your output per square metre is the same, if not better, than what you're doing at the moment. When you look at it from a brass tacks point of view, what you're seeing is then if you add the total amount together, it'll give you about 48,000 of an advantage compared to just bringing the pigs completely to sale weight without taking any selections and opening the gate. So that 48,000 for a 600 sow unit obviously is very valuable at the moment in the industry.
Yeah, and they were the figures you were using. I remember the factory grading, I think it was 28,000 for a 600 sow unit or something like that. So that clearly has a benefit for the farmer.
Yep, and the big advantage is that they can do it without spending a huge amount on structural rearranging of what they have. It's simply a case of not selecting any pigs going into your finisher section, going in 3 weeks before it, taking the tops of your pigs, about 25% of your pigs out of the unit, allowing the other pigs about 0.8 square metres of space, and as a result of that, by spending this time, you can recoup about 48,500.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Our news correspondent Pat O'Toole has archive material and analysis on the 1966 March for Farmers' Rights in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. I asked him what led farmers to march on Dublin some 50 years ago.
I suppose a growing sense of frustration at lack of representation. We're losing 10,000 farmers a year from the sector. Smaller farmers were on £5 a week. Subsistence farming was still common in rural Ireland, and there had been a growing campaign for a marketing board, a meat marketing board. We'd had expansion of the beef herd as relations continued to normalise with the UK, which was our largest market. There was a growing price gap for beef between the UK and Ireland. Irish beef was only getting 3/4 of the price of the British beef. So a lot of things that are resonating still today.
So just paint a little picture, I suppose, of farming as a whole. Was beef, for example, on the hoof or on the hook? Where did our milk go? Where did our grain go? What were the sectors that were big at the time?
mixed farming was common. It was the norm. So most farms had hens and pigs, pork and eggs, and chicken meat was a staple diet of the farm. Vegetables were grown on every farm for home consumption and sale. Potatoes were grown on every farm. Then I suppose the beef herd was expanding. Agronomy was improving in terms of crops. Crops were grown all over the country. Counties like Kerry and Galway had much more tillage than they do now. It was a much more localised market because there were no lorries to transport straw 300 miles. The non-tillage areas would have used reeds for bedding rather than straw. And again, the sale of product was largely through marts, through markets. It was localised, local butchers, local grain merchants, local maltsters and millers. It was very much a localised market. You sold locally and the product was largely consumed locally. The UK was by far our biggest export market. We did still have a significant export footprint, mainly to the UK, and it was a difficult trading environment for Ireland at the time.
So, a group of farmers, the first set off from Bantry around the 7th of October, took a lot of miles, 20 miles a day I think it took them, and finally, I don't know, X number reached the steps of Agriculture House.
Yeah. 30,000 farmers on the 19th of October reached Dublin in a choreographed arrival.
And there they stayed.
They stayed. They made their protest on that day. There was a Declaration of Farmers' Rights read out, which got the approval of the Vatican and the Papal Nuncio, and they used the language which was being used by the civil rights marchers in the United States. They were echoing the sentiments of Martin Luther King. That was there was a genuine attempt to break this out past what we still talk about, the grass ceiling, where farmers are in a circular conversation with themselves, and this became the big issue of the day in the country. Ricard Deasy was the leader of the NFA, and he, along with 8 others who'd been handpicked because they were above farmer politics or party politics, they were universally recognised. Some of them had been involved in the War of Independence, some of them had served in the National Guard during the Second World War, and they sat on the steps because the Minister for Agriculture of the day, Charles Haughey, refused to meet them. The government was just turning over at the time. Sean Lemass was retiring. He met Ricard Deasy briefly. Then they were succeeded by Jack Lynch and by Neil Blaney. And there was an escalation, I suppose, of hostilities. Neil Blaney said he would not meet them. The farmers said they would not leave. They were forcibly removed from the steps and placed on the pavement. And there they stayed. And stayed. And
there was that infamous photo of Ricard Deasy, there's reading the Irish Farmers Journal on the steps. Why didn't, because we see it so common now, when we're a week after the budget, where all the farmer organisations have put forward their pre-budget submissions, they meet with the minister, the current minister today, Michael Creed, regularly. Why didn't Charles J. Haughey and subsequently Neil Blaney want to meet with these farmers?
There was an underlying feeling the NFA was a blue shirt organisation. It was a Fianna Fáil government. Whether there was that. Remember, Ireland was still a very young country. It was less than 50 years since the War of Independence and the Civil War had ended. We just celebrated the Silver Jubilee of the GPO. So as far back to 1966 as we are now, and the memories we have of 1966, that's the memory people had of 1916, of the formation of the state. And it was a young country, and farming was at a crossroads at that stage, because it had been the backbone of rural Ireland, but so many farms for subsistence. And now we're moving towards the EEC, we're moving towards commercial farming. Much like now, costs were rising, inputs were increasing, and while output was improving, farmers were finding it hard to make ends meet.
The battle wasn't just being fought on the steps of Department of Agriculture. The farmers who were involved with NFA, their personal lives and family lives and farms were being targeted as a result of this.
Yeah, as the protest and vigil continued morning, noon and night into December, farmers decided to refuse to pay their rates. At the time, rates were crippling. And farmers refused to pay the rates. Farmers were jailed when we went into 1967. Initially, the 1s and 2s, but it ended up there were over 100 farmers in jail.
For how long?
Some served days, some served months. It lasted well into the middle of 1967. the government was on the brink of prescribing the NFA, of making them an illegal organisation. There was road blockades, machinery was seized from farms of farmers who'd refused to pay rates. The mehel kicked in, where neighbours would come together and work the farm for anyone who'd been taken away. Really was a case where farmers had drawn the line in the sand and would not yield. And I think the key there was that they weren't looking for a specific outcome. It wasn't 90 pence a pound. They were looking for recognition. They were insisting.
A seat at the table, essentially.
Yeah, and insisting on the right to be heard. And government did accept that they had that right in the end.
And we fast forward 50 years, farm prices are under as much pressure as they were at any stage, and whatever currency we were involved in. Can we underestimate the work of what not only the 9 people who did it, but the people who marched first, the people who tended to the crops and farms, of those who've been imprisoned? You know, they really set the scene and put us in a position where farmers have representation and farmers are taken seriously by government.
Well, I think the key measure of the success, at the time there was about 177,000 farmers in the 1966 census. This week, the single farm payment is issuing to over 110,000 farmers. There's over 125,000 applicants for the single farm payment this year. They will all get their money over the next couple of months. They certainly slowed the bleeding on Irish farms, and they ensured that there was a future. Unfortunately, way too many small farms are still making an income that's not acceptable, but they ensured that there was an option for people to stay in rural Ireland and work on the farms, and for that we should be eternally grateful to them.
Thank you, Pat. And you can read more about the Farmers' Rights March of 1966 in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, we all remember answering the shoebox appeal and sending presents to the children across the developing world. My colleague Aisling Hussey writes about Team Hope, the charity behind the shoeboxes, in this week's Irish Country Living. And she told Thomas Shebert how everyone can take part.
A lot of people in Ireland, like you said, would be very familiar with it. A lot of schools would have taken part, so people probably in their 20s and 30s will be very familiar with, getting the shoebox at home and filling it with presents. So basically what it is you just get a shoebox at home, you fill it with presents, so you have to adhere to the 4 W's, so it's something to wear, something to wash, something to write with, and something to wow. So the boxes then are collected by Team Hope, volunteers from across the country, and there's hundreds of them, and they're all dispatched out to countries all over the world. So there's about 11 now at the moment, ranging from countries in Eastern Europe and countries in Africa, and some refugees are also in receipt of them in Europe.
And so what kind of a difference do they make for the lives of these children?
So I met Jill Kinsey, who's the founder of Plan's Children's Centre in Lesotho, and she's seen firsthand the impact these boxes have had on children. And she said that some of the stories are incredibly sad, but one that kind of stuck out for me was a story of the shepherd boy who was completely abandoned by his family, and he was living rough, and he was abused by a lot of people who he would have trusted, and he came to the centre completely he was broken. Like, he was just a little boy and he didn't know how to trust adults, and he'd never received a present in his life, obviously, and she couldn't kind of get him to come round, and so she went to the box anyway she had there from the shoebox appeal, and she just opened one to see was there anything there that might put a smile on his face, and she came across plastic cows, and now this little boy had been it's awful, but he'd actually, when he came to the centre, he thought he wouldn't survive because there was no cows there, and he'd been suckling milk from cows to survive. Incredibly sad. And when he saw these little plastic cows, it put a smile on his face because it was something that was familiar to him, and he's been there now ever since, and he's thriving and he's doing well now. But even things like copybooks and pens, things that we completely take for granted. I also met with Carol Hennessy, who spearheaded the launch of the shoebox appeal 20 years ago, and she met a little girl in Romania who got a copybook and a pen, and what she wanted to do was be a doctor. So things like that are just invaluable for children, just so that it has them to aspire to as well.
So you've given us a little sample there, something to write with, obviously, a few toys that have a personal significance. Any other examples of what children are likely to receive?
Yeah, so like really simple gifts. So obviously they all have to be newly bought or as good as new, because if you're getting a present from someone, you want it to be shiny and new, you want to have something to open. And people might think that, children from developing countries mightn't notice the difference, but they would of course, they'd notice that if a teddy bear is missing an eye, and especially when it's the first present that they might have received, or the first present that they'll receive that year, you kind of want it to be special for them. So, things now, even like sweets, so like Haribo, stuff like that. No chocolate though, because it'll melt if you send it to Africa, obviously. Like things like sunglasses, cuddly toys, a skipping rope, a torch. You could send them, gift from Ireland, like a postcard. Things like toothbrushes as well, obviously. And the age ranges then, there's 3 different groups you can pick from. So you can go to 2 to 4, 5 to 9, and 10 to 14. And you pick between either a boy or a girl. And apparently boys between 10 to 14, that's the most difficult to get boxes for. So I think that's it's good to bear in mind as well, for anyone who's thinking. Yeah.
All right, try to remember.
Toy tractors and stuff like that as well.
Exactly. So let's say I have a few toys, a shoebox. How can I get involved and get it over to someone who will enjoy it?
Yeah, so the boxes have to be ready for collection by 11th November. And there are 400 collection points across the country. So if you're, part of a school or like an workplace, if you've more than 50 boxes, local Team Hope volunteers will come along and collect them for you. And if not, you can just visit the website or call them to arrange a place where you can drop them off. So if you visit teamhope.ie, you can find out more about how to drop off the boxes and how to get involved.
And you have all the contact details anyway in
Yes.
this week's Irish Country Living. Thank you, Aisling.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Greenore, the home of Irish dairy.